Hello, my name is Reece. I would like to also acknowledge the Gundungurra people in the Tarawal, the custodians of this place. I actually was down at Bong Bong Common last week with the kids and came across this quote courtesy of Auntie Val that I thought was lovely actually. Geelong Piala Waru Ninkambe Baru Gura. They talk around the fire at camp, and I thought it was really symbolic of what we're going to do tonight. Have a bit of a chat, bit of a discussion. So thank you to Auntie Val for passing on that language and sharing it with us. Also, thanks to the WinZero team as well, because they are all volunteers. And I work with a lot of community groups around the country, and they achieve a lot, a huge amount, with very little resources. And they're doing work that benefits all of us, that benefits our place and the environment and our country and our children. So, thank you for what you do, even though, you might have your arm twisted, but it's also very much appreciated from all of us. I'm going to explore the case for a regenerative economy, looking a little bit at the problems that we need to fix. I mean, that will include a little bit of talk about the bushfires. There is some images of the bushfires in here as well, so I just wanted to warn you before we go there. I'm not going to dwell too much on problems because tonight really is about solutions and about the opportunity space, of which there are many for us here in the Highlands. And then we're going to have a bit of a chat with a fantastic panel of experts, all locals, who are going to share some of their experience and expertise with us as well. So, the case for regeneration. Well, 4 years ago, we had a national awakening. We had a pretty challenging time here in the Highlands as well, and other places around the country with the bushfires and then with the floods. It was a pretty challenging time for a lot of people. Regional communities like ours bore the brunt. We're often on the front line when it comes to natural disasters, but regional communities also led the recovery. It was regional communities that were on the forefront of the impacts, but also were often the first responders as well. And what has been so inspiring to see is that often these regional communities were not just responding as first responders, but they also went on to say, well, hang on a minute, what else can we do now to build resilience in our community and build autonomy and agency in our community as well? And so what we're going to be exploring tonight are what some of those communities have done and some of the really interesting examples of regenerative enterprise that are popping up around the country. Anyone here, are there any regenerative business owners here or staff? You just put your hand up. Interesting to see. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. That's really great. And thank you for what you do. A little bit about me and my journey. So I was, for 6 years, head of innovation and impact investment at WWF Australia. And I thought I was pretty happy working at the global level. I worked in a global role. But like many people after the bushfires, things come into focus. And so I was looking for a way to play a role with what I had at my disposal and my sphere of influence to help to build the resilience of my place and places like it around the country. Everything sort of came into focus at that point. And so I developed a program called Innovate to Regenerate at WWF. And it started off with a listening campaign, going and speaking with and listening to regional communities that had been affected by the bushfires around Australia and the floods, and asking them what they wanted. There was a lot of rhetoric happening at the time, if you remember, about building back better and how we were going to build back Australia, and there were lots of competing views at the time, mostly from the top. And so the idea was to actually ask the people in communities what they wanted to see and how Australia can grow out of this challenge that we had. What we heard from that listening campaign, hundreds of people around the country, thousands actually, we turned into a film called Regenerating Australia, made by Damon Gamo. And it was a look at Australia in 10 years' time after we had successfully transitioned to a regenerative economy. And some of the things, and all of it was essentially what we heard in the listening campaign, told through the voices of people. There was a screening here in Bowral as well and all around the country. Off the back of that film, we launched an innovation challenge called Innovate to Regenerate with a $2 million fund to help to identify some of the most interesting and exciting and innovative solutions that were in the film and make them real, bring them to life. And we ran workshops around the country to support communities who were interested in nurturing these solutions while transitioning to a regenerative economy. And most recently, that work has led to Regen Labs, which is outside of WWF. And along with my co-founders, we started about a year ago to support regenerative enterprises, to match them with the right kind of finance. Getting the right kind of finance, non-extractive finance, is important, and support communities to create the right kind of enabling environment for regenerative enterprises to flourish. So why do we need a regenerative economy? Well, quite simply, we are living with the consequences right now of an extractive economy. And unfortunately, sustainability, equilibrium is no longer enough. We can't stay where we are because, as you can see from the pie chart there, we've burst through a number of the planetary boundaries. So when it comes to things like climate change, species loss, land use change, chemical and material footprint, like there is a limit, there's a carrying capacity of the earth. And unfortunately, we're way above that in terms of the resource use and impacts here in Australia. So to give you an idea, Australia, if the whole world was to use resources like Australia does, we'd need 4.5 Earths. 4.5. Currently around the world, the average is 1.7 Earths. So we are way outside our carrying capacity. We can't stay where we are. We need to actively regenerate to bring ourselves back into the safe zone. We all know the effects of climate change. You know, great to be top of the league table with medals in the Olympics. It's not very cool being top of the league table with species loss, which Australia is at the moment. So not great. So we have a lot of work to do to get back into the safe zone. And business and finance can play a key role working with communities at the heart. The good news is that this transition is underway. It's been underway for a while. The types of business models that are responsible for us bursting through the planetary boundaries and some of the challenges that we're facing have what's called an extractive business model or degenerative business model. These business models are losing their social license, right? And we can see that in the news every night. There was big stories about PFAS, right? Forever chemicals that we saw in the news recently. These are companies that make a lot of money, and there's nothing wrong with making a lot of money, but the negative impacts of how they make their money are externalized off their business, who pays the cost for those negative impacts? We do. The planet does. Our tax dollars do. Those business models are losing their social license. So it could be PFAS, it could be tobacco, it could be fast food, it could be fossil fuels, right? Those types of business models are losing social license to operate. We're transitioning away. At the same time, we're seeing regenerative business models increasing and improving. We're about here in the uptake curve, but there's more work to do. And one of the most important things that we can do right now is support experimentation and innovation. So we have more examples of those regenerative business models that we can lift up and accelerate and scale. So there's lots of definitions of a regenerative economy. I like this one. I'm going to go through a few. I like this one from Kate Raworth, who's the Oxford economist and author of Donut Economics. She says, economies and enterprises must become regenerative by design, so they restore and then work within the cycles of the living world. At the same time, we need economies and enterprises that are distributive by design, sharing value, power, and opportunity far more equitably with all involved. So there's this, regenerative by design, distributed by design, make sure it's equal. The benefits of that transition are equal and not centralized and concentrated. At the same time, place-based. So big push to explore what a place-based economy means. And I really love this quote from Jim Chalmers. He says, I truly believe place-based solutions are critical to empowering communities and delivering solutions that actually work. Big fan coming from the federal government. What does it look like, a place-based economy? Another really nice quote. This one came from Damon Gammo, the director of the Regenerating Australia film. He says, a regenerative economy is an economy that heals the future rather than steals from the future. So we're again, those extractive business models are taking from our future, the future of our kids. Regenerative business models are healing that future. And so what we're excited about when it comes to place-based economies is that they are businesses from many, many sectors that are nested within a society that is nested within the environment. So business plays a critical role in supporting a healthy environment, a flourishing society. They're interconnected, they're sharing nutrients with each other, and they're building the potential of a whole system within which they operate. What's so special about these businesses? Now, what we've noticed over the last 4 years or so of working with these regenerative enterprises around Australia is that they share some current traits. One of them is that they are often holistic in their impact. They have multidimensional impact. So they're achieving impact across a number of different horizons. It could be local economic development, in regional communities like ours, but it might also be that they're improving social impact and building resilience in communities as well. If you look at the virtual energy network, that's about building energy resilience in our community. It might be that they're drawing down carbon from the atmosphere, or that they're protecting and restoring biodiversity like regenerative agriculture, or that they're foregrounding First Nations wisdom. Not all businesses will do all of these things, right? That's too hard. It's too hard if we're setting them all up to say you've got to be up there. They'll do some of them though. And with time, they might do more. I'm going to run through a few examples now. Now, these are examples from around Australia, and some of which we funded through the Innovate to Regenerate program. There are heaps in the Southern Highlands as well, but I'm not going to, talk about too many of them tonight. I'm going to share some from outside of our area because there's too many to list in the Southern Highlands. So I like this one, which is called Food Connect up in Brisbane. It's one of the original regenerative businesses that really, they experimented with this, the community-owned asset. So they are Australia's first community-owned food hub that connects farmers with city consumers. What's really interesting about what Food Connect did is that they raised $2 million from their local community. So they have 500 community investors co-bought and co-own this asset in Brisbane. So the wealth is staying within their community. It's not being extracted out of their community. It aggregates produce from about 200 farmers from within 500 kilometres of Brisbane. So it does a really important job in terms of supporting the regenerative agriculture farmers around Brisbane. And this diversified business model includes commercial kitchens, co-working space, and events. So it's just a good business. It just makes a lot of sense. But it's a really interesting model for alternative ownership. Then there's this example, Resource, which is based in the Hunter Valley. It's an area in transition. There are coal-fired power stations that are going to be transitioning away from their current business models. There's big problems with coal ash dams up there as a waste product. What they've managed to do is make sure that it's not a waste product, because there should be no such thing as waste, right? So there's a technology that they've developed. They're still very early in their journey, right? Which is why we need to be supporting these types of regenerative entrepreneurs. But what they've done is develop a technology that allows the coal ash dams to be emptied. They're also creating jobs for the workers in these transition areas. So that by their modelling, they'll create up to 300 jobs for workers that might have to transition away from coal. And lastly, their plan is to establish a regeneration fund that funds community projects. So they're driving wealth back into their community. They're sharing the benefits of this transition. Really interesting model. When it comes to housing and development, big opportunity, big issue, big conversation point in our shire at the moment. Circular economy villages have got a really interesting model that integrates renewable energy microgrid, water microgrid, diverse regenerative agricultural systems, and co-working and living spaces. What I love about this is that they're building a culture of innovation in the housing and development sector as well. It's a really interesting model. So they've already partnered with Bellingen Council, who have gone, this looks interesting. Like, how might we explore something like this in our shire? Because they have this partnership with Bellingen Council, they've also now got a partnership with Armidale Council, the next council along. I think what they're doing, they're exploring 3 new settlements based on circular economy and regenerative development principles. So this concept is gaining traction. And again, the most important thing we can do is support the people who are experimenting, and driving innovation. Another interesting one is Mycelia Energy Collective down in Victoria. So similar to the Virtual Energy Network, it's great to see there's lots of flowers blooming when it comes to community energy. Their business model is around enabling 150 businesses and households to share renewable energy through their virtual energy grid. So what this means is a big focus of theirs is on low-income households and community groups and businesses. They have a community-centered benefit sharing fund, again, driving some of these benefits back into the local community rather than it being extracted out. They run community workshops to increase energy literacy and energy efficiency, and they're shaping replication pathways, because when it comes to regenerative businesses, one of the big differences is that often they look to share their IP, to share their learnings, their insights. So rather than the current paradigm of we need to keep hold of everything and compete with each other, they look to share what they're doing. Now, it doesn't mean they're not going to make money from it, right? Social franchising is a model that is interesting to look at. But what it means is that we can explore efficiency dividends through the replication of these models from one community to another community. So we're saving time in the process. We're saving time. We're building this flourishing network of regenerative businesses around the country. Okay, Yambala, Ewan Country, down the south coast of the southern New South Wales. This is a 5th generation family farm on the southern border of New South Wales. What's really interesting about their model, this is Jim sitting down there with the beanie on. So the model of Yambala enables the value in the privately held land in Australia, which is estimated at about 50%, to be unlocked through sharing country with traditional owners. So what's really interesting about this is that they are in effect operating as a regenerative enterprise incubator. So they're partnering with Black Duck. And you can see Bruce Pascoe there, who is one of the founders of Black Duck Foods, which is exploring the development of native grains in Australia. They can act as an incubator. So they're exploring new land management practices, novel forestry, native foods, tourism, education. And again, their intention is to share this knowledge, to share what's working and what isn't working with other landholders around Australia. Native grains is an interesting one, right? Because it's such an exciting opportunity for Australia. It ticks so many boxes, but it's a relatively undeveloped market. Like, there isn't a big enough market to support lots of entrepreneurship in Australia. So one way we can support these entrepreneurs is by getting them a start, getting them off the ground, supporting them to do the experimentation work. The other way they need to be supported is through the growth of markets that's going to provide an opportunity for them to scale their businesses. So I wanted to share this example from the US, which is a partnership between Patagonia, which you might know from as a clothing company, and Perennial Promise Growers Cooperative. Very famous picture there on the right of the Kersner plant, which has these long roots which do amazing things like building soil health, depleting topsoil, preventing erosion, protects groundwater. Also draws down and stores more carbon as well. Also, I love this one, the grain contains more protein, fiber, and certain nutrients than common wheat varieties. Tick, beer, becoming healthy. I'm not a doctor, don't quote me on that. And the farmers in this cooperative are able to then scale their growing enterprises because Patagonia is coming in, providing the market. It's providing the opportunity, the security and the confidence for them to scale their operations. So, question for us here in the Highlands, how might we attract the types of corporates like Patagonia into our space to provide the similar confidence for our growers, our farmers, in fact, regenerative businesses of any kind, in any sector? So what might our journey look like to a local regenerative economy, and how do we get there? I'm going to share a couple of examples of some communities that we've worked with at Regen Labs. There are more models. There are lots of models out there for how to transition a local community towards a regenerative economy. These are just two models, two communities that we've been working with. So Adelaide Hills and East Gippsland. Back in 2022, we ran a regenerative enterprise lab in both of these places, which is around convening because we know when it comes to resilience, the bedrock of resilience is relationships. So first thing, bring people together. These were people from council, business leaders, traditional owners, community leaders, to say, what might a regenerative economy look like for you in your place? What's unique about your place? Because again, it's not a cookie cutter approach. So how might we explore what a regenerative economy looks like for you? From there, they launched their own local sector-based strategies. So for Adelaide Hills and Coast, they're exploring food and fibre. That's the sort of the comparative advantage in their place that they're exploring. For East Gippsland, they're exploring regen tourism, food and fibre, and new energy. All right, so what might it look like for our place? And next, we're helping them to grow capabilities, attract the right kind of finance, non-extractive finance, and accelerate cohorts of regen enterprises in their place, which are going to help to then nurture and grow the regenerative economy, supporting communities, keeping wealth, thriving wealth back into the community, supporting the rehabilitation and the regeneration of the local environment, and so on. Okay, I'm going to finish up with, we've spent a lot of time looking at the bottom up, right? The work that's happening in communities in around Australia, and this work is being driven by communities around Australia. It really is inspiring, but there is support happening from the top down as well. So what's going on? Around the world, sustainable finance is growing very fast, and it's going to continue to grow. Over the past decade, the number of cooperatives has risen, and the top 300 now collectively generate 2.15 trillion. So in Australia, it's not as developed, the cooperative sector. It's huge in the US and in Europe. Big opportunity for us. And if you look at the Perennial Growers Cooperative, that was all about aggregating their buying power and protecting themselves and making themselves an attractive proposition. But there are other models for cooperatives as well, and mutuals that are really quite innovative. The global value of the sharing economy reached 600 billion by 2027, another different kind of business model. Here in Australia, the nature repair market could unlock 137 billion. So that's a lot for the types of businesses that are operating in this space. And then a word on where the money comes from to support these types of businesses in an early stage. So this is just one example of a very big foundation from the UK that's committed $200 million for visionaries, pathfinders, and regenerative initiatives. Now, the good news is this is picking up pace here in Australia as well. Philanthropists are asking how their money can be used to support this kind of regenerative innovation and regenerative projects. It's not where it is in the US yet. We don't have the same culture of philanthropy in Australia that they do in the US, but it is growing, and it's a really good sign. And lastly, when it comes to impact investing, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, there was a group, the Foundation Group for Impact Investing was established last year with a mandate to support innovative forms of impact investing to support for-purpose enterprises to meet their potential. So there is investment that is available for these types of exciting for-purpose regenerative businesses. Let's learn a little bit more about this. Okay, so impact investing in Australia has grown a large amount over the last 5 years or so, from 30 billion to 500 billion expected next year. So this is investment that is used to drive positive impact. Now, there's a broad spectrum of positive impact. So it's not all super effective. Some of it's very effective, but the size of the market is growing. The size of the potential is growing. And impact investors are saying there isn't a shortfall of capital in Australia. There's a shortfall of investable regenerative solutions. So how can we increase the amount, the volume, the pipeline of investable regenerative solutions in Australia? And what's our opportunity here in the Highlands? Very quickly, this came out last week. Easy to miss this. See, it was in the news, easy to miss it. But this is the government's priorities when it comes to science, technology, and industry development over the next 10 years. Priorities are transitioning to a net zero future, supporting healthy and thriving communities, elevating Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledge systems, protecting and restoring Australia's environment, building a secure and resilient nation. I had to chuckle because it's almost identical to the pie chart that we developed a few years ago for regenerative enterprises. So, there's no causality there, right? But the things are moving in the right direction, right? And there is significant support coming for this type of work. So what does it mean for us locally? Our Shire has all the key ingredients required for regenerative enterprises to thrive. We've got a new council. Do we have any council candidates with us tonight? Thank you. This is really exciting because we want the new council to support this work. So thank you for showing your support. We've got the Southern Highlands Innovation Park. Now, it's actually a pretty interesting read. The master plan is out now. It's worth having a read. It's on the council website. Big opportunity for us here in the Highlands. But let's get regenerative innovation baked into this from the outset. Let's not go for the same old. Strong entrepreneurial culture and vibrant local economy. Deep connection to place. It keeps on coming through in all the surveys. Are there any other council survey nerds here? I read them all. And in every survey that's published, the same thing always comes through. This deep connection to place, the love of nature and heritage and place, and a valued local environment. And of course, when it comes to markets, the proximity to Sydney, Canberra, Wollongong. So I'm going to finish up with 4 ideas we could explore here in the Highlands. First of all, how might we nurture a culture of innovation? We don't need to wait for bricks and mortar for the Southern Highlands Innovation Park. It might take a while. We can do it now. We can start to build or continue to build. There already is a culture of innovation here. We can continue to build this culture of innovation in the Highlands. We could explore new community wealth building models or alternative ownership models and ways of attracting investment back into our region that drives wealth back into our community. 30 seconds on Plasma Refine. I'm not going to open that can of worms, all right? But what I will say is, aside from all of the questionable environmental impacts, social impacts, and everything else, all of the benefit, all of the wealth was going to flow out of our region, right, through where it was owned. So when we're exploring these types of businesses, how might we explore models that keep the wealth in our region, that drive the wealth back into our region and distribute it, just like Kate Rayworth was saying, evenly and equitably, rather than centralizing it or extracting it? How might we measure what matters? So if we go back to the pie chart at the beginning, right, we're breaking through these planetary boundaries, but we're also there are significant issues, social issues around housing and affordability and inequality and mental health issues for our teenagers, right? How might we start to measure well-being rather than just GDP, especially when it comes to measuring the well-being of our place, of our region? And this is an example from Melbourne. Gippsland have done a similar thing, so we can do it here. And lastly, empowered participation, making sure that we all have a say, not just a say, all right, but actually get our hands dirty and co-design and be involved in the development of these types of really exciting and interesting models, which we could all be part of. So I'm going to leave it there and move through to our panel discussion.